This bonus episode features live music from Todd Roth at the end of the episode. Enjoy the remix, guys.
Is the way in which we propagate our species.
Please demonstrate how this is accomplished.
Hey guys, Mark Caples here with the Hard Knock University podcast. This is my buddy Todd. Say hi, Todd.
Hi, Todd.
So this is another remix. Episode 3 from season 1, Embracing Discomfort. We had our guest Todd Roth, and we talked a lot about how in project management and in music and in life, oftentimes you're just not comfortable and you have to kind of deal with that.
Embrace the awkward.
Yeah.
Embrace the suck.
Yeah. So this episode is a remix. It's episode 3, respun with some of the humor that we developed halfway through the season to make it more enjoyable. So I hope you guys enjoy it. If you got any complaints, email Todd.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Mark.
So why specifically project management and leadership?
Because that's what the book is about.
Why is the book about that?
It's a made-up tale.
The 7 sacred lessons from the School of Hard Knocks.
This one was invented by a writer.
I learned the hard way. Actually, it was a good learning experience.
It's a total fabrication. It never happened.
It's the Hard Knock University podcast, where real talk meets real lessons. We all graduate with honors in the School of Life.
Wretched, isn't it?
Hey everybody, you're listening to the Hard Knock University podcast. I'm Mark Caples. If you're just joining us for the first time, I encourage you to go back and check out episode 1 and episode 2.
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
I don't.
Episode 1 was a kind of a primer on what to expect from the podcast and project management 101 kind of thing. And episode 2, last week's episode, we reviewed chapter 1 from my book, The Hard Knock School of Project Management. We highlighted 7 key lessons for project managers. We reviewed The $1 Trillion Coach for our book of the week for its leadership insights. And the episode featured an interview with Johnny Buonadonna, where we discussed his unique career shift from law enforcement to project management, and ended with a hypothetical challenge and, starting a contracting business with minimal resources. It was fun. We had a good time.
Who told you to do that?
On this episode, we're going to explore the theme of discomfort in project management and life. We'll review chapter 2 from the Hard Knock School of Project Management and focus on how constant discomfort leads to growth. The book of the week, What You Do Is Who You Are by Ben Horowitz, is going to be discussed, and we'll emphasize cultural leadership in challenging times. And then we'll have a special interview with Todd Roth, my friend and a blues musician and luthier. We're going to highlight parallels between art, craft, and project management, emphasizing resilience and innovation. But first, my week.
The details of my life are quite inconsequential.
Oh, no, please. Let's hear about your childhood.
Okay. Very well. Where do I begin?
Hey, what's up, Hard Knockers? Welcome to another segment of My Week, where the only thing consistent is chaos. Let's talk about the algorithm. I've been doing some mad scientist experimenting lately, testing short format vertical bonus content against the full screen version. And the clear winner is the 9x16 video, the reels, the shorts, the kind of stuff that would have gotten you roasted alive 10 years ago for filming vertically like that. Back then, if you posted a portrait mode video, the internet treated you like you'd just kicked a puppy.
Shame. 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 Shame, shame, shame. Shame on you. Shame, shame, shame. Shame on you. This was serious, but it turned into something fun.
But guess what? The internet flipped its script. Vertical is the algorithm now. According to Insider Intelligence, 75% of all video plays are vertical. TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, they're all rigged in favor of that scroll hypnosis content style. Mobile first isn't just a trend anymore, it's the throne. And I'm learning to bow the hell down. Okay, something inspiring. I saw this video of Chapel Roan back when she was playing Pink Pony Club in a park for like 20 people. Half of them probably there for the swings, not the music. And then it would flash back to a packed house at ACL.
with thousands of people singing her lyrics like it's gospel. That's not just success, that's earned. That's reps. That's sticking with it when the only ones clapping are your mom and a homeless guy that's using your rig to charge his phone.
I Googled you today just to see what pops up, and it says...
Did you not know who I was before?
No.
The same goes for people like Mr. Beast. The dude started off dropping Mentos in Coke bottles, and now he's running this huge content empire. You only see the wins, once they're shiny, the big, closing act. But that internship phase, that's where the real magic happens. And you don't see that. And listen, I'm paying my dues. I'm watching the numbers slowly rise. The likes, they're getting higher. The shares, they're growing. And the haters, they're still hating, but they're doing it in my comments section instead of their group private chats. And that's better for the algorithm.
We're gonna get all in your face and point out your faults.
A roast? I've always wanted to be roasted.
Everyone's here today because they care about you and they want you to get well.
She ain't funny. Next.
Frank, you're an asshole.
Ah, that's it. Now rain down on me. Come
You're
on.
a prick.
Give it to me with both barrels.
Well, why do we never play night crawlers anymore, huh?
Now on to the real headline of the week. Gen Z has discovered drinking coffee at home. Yeah, there's an actual trend piece floating around where people are setting up home coffee shops with pastries and houseplants and mood lighting. This is an actual quote. The full experience just without spending $8 a cup. Guys, Gen Z invented drinking coffee at home. Next up, they're going to invent dinner at the house and wearing the same pair of pants twice. What a time to be alive.
What can I get you?
I'd like a large coffee.
Okay, so hot coffee.
Hot coffee.
Okay, room for cream.
Totally leave room for cream.
Why are you talking like that?
Why are you talking like that?
Because this is my voice?
This is my voice.
No, it's not. I heard you talking a minute ago. I know you don't talk like that.
Neither do you, because nobody actually talks like this. You choose to talk like this, and today I chose to talk like this. Pretty fucking annoying, isn't it?
You're a total dick, man.
There you go. Good. You're talking.
Wow.
All right, that's enough ranting from me. Coming up next on this remix episode, we're diving into chapter 2 of the Hard Knock School of Project Management. And stay tuned for a fresh knockback segment featuring Todd Roth, where we talk craft, chaos, and the creative fire. Plus, you're not going to want to miss Todd Roth's live performance at the end of this episode. Let's get into it, guys.
Welcome back, scholars of life's toughest lessons, to the Hard Knock University podcast. I'm your host, Mark Caples. Today, we're tackling a subject that might just push you out of your comfort zone, but that's where the magic happens. We're on episode 3, and we're talking all about embracing discomfort. Whether you're a seasoned project manager or someone who's just learning to navigate the unpredictable waves of life and career, you know that growth often comes wrapped in the uncomfortable.
You're talking like a song from The Lion King. Stop that. It makes no sense.
Today, we'll explore why that is and how to turn those uneasy moments into stepping stones for success. We got a fantastic lineup for you. We're going to start with the review of chapter 2 from my book, The Hard Knock School of Project Management, titled You're Always Uncomfortable. Next, we're going to delve into our book of the week, What You Do Is Who You Are by Ben Horowitz, where we'll discuss how cultural leadership thrives in discomfort. But wait, there's more. I'm thrilled to introduce our special guest, Todd Roth, a blues musician and artisan luthier, who will share how the life of a self-employed artist mirrors the challenges and victories of project management.
Listen to this right now. There's 2 things you need to know. I'm the king, and number 2 is look out, man. Look at that, they're coming at you. You see that? It's called karate, man, and only 2 kinds of people know it. The Chinese and the king. One of them is me.
You're the king.
Oh, come on, man. Oh, come on. Sit around now. Turn around. Sit around. Look out, man. Look at this. Some long game, sir, man.
Well, thanks, Elvis.
Well, I'm on it, man. Come on.
What the fuck was he talking about?
And to cap it all off, we'll take a deep dive into the art of embracing change, no matter how uncomfortable it feels at first. So buckle up, grab your notepad, or perhaps just your curiosity, I don't know, because we're about to get very comfortable with being uncomfortable here at the Hard Knock University podcast. Let's get started. Hard Knock School of Project Management, 7 hard lessons I learned the hard way. Chapter 2, you're always uncomfortable. Again, I always start with 2 quotes. Our first quote for this chapter is from Conor McGregor. The more you seek the uncomfortable, the more you will become comfortable. Our second quote is from one of my favorite authors, Ian Fleming. A horse is dangerous at both ends and uncomfortable in the middle. Why you can't get too comfortable. Comfort in project management is hard to come by. There's too many wild cards. Everything keeps changing. Just when you think you've got the hang of a project, bam, something shifts. It could be what the client wants. It could be what the client needs, which runs counter to what they want. It could be a shift in who is on your team or even the deadline. This constant shuffle means you're always on your toes, never quite settled. As soon as you fall into a groove, the beat changes. The unknowns add to this. No matter how much you plan, there are always curveballs. Material procurement issues that you didn't see coming. Permit delays, team conflicts, or even sudden market shifts. All these factors and many more keep you from getting too comfortable. Then there's the pressure of the job itself, always on, the deadlines, the budgets, high expectations. It's like being James Bond, but it's all the bad guys that have the cool gadgets that turn the tide of the fight. You're dealing with the risks, trying to guess what might go wrong next, and trying to get out in front of it before it derails the entire train. Evie Pomporis and the Bulletproof Vest. Evie Pomporis is a former Secret Service field agent and author of the book Becoming Bulletproof. In her book, she talks about how a bulletproof vest is made and how they work, and how you can apply these principles to make yourself bulletproof. In the sense that when challenges start to fly at you like bullets, you can be ready to absorb the impact and move forward without damage to your mental well-being. So think about how a bulletproof vest is made. It's like a sandwich of tough materials where each layer helps to spread out and weaken the impact of a bullet. It's not one layer doing all the work, but all of them together. The vest adapts to the threat, much like how you adjust your project management style for different projects. Throughout the decades, bulletproof vests have been tested and upgraded with new tech. What started as plate armor and chain mail to protect knights from the impact of a blade evolved to modern technology that protects law enforcement from lead projectiles flying at near the speed of sound, just as you learn from each project, tweaking your approach for the next one. When it comes to learning on the fly, each project adds another layer to your vest of skills. You're learning all the time, making you more and more ready for whatever comes next with each new contract. When something new hits you out of nowhere, it's like a bullet hitting a vest. At first, it might throw you off, but you absorb it, learn from it, and move on, stronger. In project management, comfort isn't about relaxation, but about being prepared for action. You're always learning, adapting. Just like chainmail has evolved into bulletproof vests to meet new challenges, think of comfort less like chilling on the couch and more like being geared up, ready to tackle whatever comes. It's about being equipped, not relaxed. So just like a bulletproof vest protects while making you adapt to new threats, project management is all about building resilience through experience, staying ready for change, and understanding that true comfort lies in being prepared for the next challenge, not in avoiding them. The con man that nearly broke me. I'm not going to use his real name here. We're going to call him Mike Oxmall. Mike was going through a divorce and had a home worth about $800,000 in a nice neighborhood in Austin, Texas. The house was in great condition and really did not need a lot of work to be ready to list. A fresh coat of paint, new floors, haul off a busted hot tub from the backyard, and fix the irrigation system, and they would have been ready to list for around $50,000. At the time, we offered pass-through services. Essentially, you could pass your utility bills, your mortgage, your storage unit fees, even your property taxes through us, and we would pay them and tack that onto your contract balance for a 20% fee. It was a great program for folks who were experiencing hardships and just needed some help to stay afloat long enough to get the renovation completed and get the house sold. The original contract was priced at $177,000. It included a full repaint of both the interior and exterior, a complete kitchen remodel including new appliances and luxury quartz countertops, new countertops in all the bathrooms, and a full remodel of the primary bath to include a huge shower and a luxury freestanding tub. Additionally, we replaced every light fixture in the home, gave the fireplace a glow-up, and replaced all the windows in the home. The roof was in dire need of replacement and was the first thing you noticed when you pulled up, but for some reason was not included in the contract. And since Mike was unemployed and going through a divorce, we agreed to allow for pass-throughs of his utilities and multiple storage units for the duration of his project, estimated at 12 weeks. The sales team had a signed contract, and the job was assigned to the first PM on the project. We're going to call him Nate. Nate was a young guy, lacking the School of Hard Knocks experience, needed to be fully ready for Hurricane Mike. Don't get me wrong, Nate was a good project manager, and I trusted him to manage my own projects while I was out on vacation. But Mike was a special case. When you're assigned a new contract, one of the first things you do is Google the stakeholders. Who is Mike? What kind of guy am I dealing with for the next 12 weeks? A quick Google search of Mike brought the entire contract into question. Mike was a contractor specializing in luxury remodels. He had numerous complaints and tons of pictures posted all over the web of the incredibly poor work he had sold. There was even a website, mikeoxmall.com, that one of his victims had put together to warn people against doing business with him. The homepage read at the top in bold letters, Mike Oxmall, incompetent or con artist. This is an adjusted quote from the website, which is still up to date. Our $200,000 mistake, we hired Village Idiot Builders to rebuild our home in 2017. After suing to collect the money he stole or misappropriated from us during a 2+ year project that should have taken less than a year, on February 6, 2021, we reluctantly agreed to accept $12,500 from him. Our attorney pointed out that even though we would likely prevail in court, collecting was an additional challenge. For all the clients he screwed over in the past, and we've spoken to several, and the ones he's going to take advantage of in the future, let this website be a warning. When his wife looks you in the eye and says she truly believes Mike is one of the best builders in Austin, to say she's wrong is an understatement. Mike Oxmall is an amazing storyteller, but an amazing contractor he is not. If you see Mike Oxmall, run the other way or be prepared to experience a nightmare that very few people have to live through. The $200,000 we lost was only a fraction of the headache and consternation caused by Village Idiot Builders. Utter incompetence and constant lying. Subs showing up at all hours demanding money. Mike never being on site. Deposits being paid to Village Idiot Builders, never making it to the vendor sub that requested it. The list of frustrations is endless. End quote. And the estranged wife didn't seem much better. There's an entire Inside Edition segment dedicated to the woman who took her young daughter and together got matching breast augmentation surgeries. Who are these people, and why on earth would we sign a contract with them? Nate raised the issues to our management team, who essentially told him, we're here to help people, not judge them. Fair enough. Let the games begin. Mike broke Nate after just a few weeks. He put in his 2 weeks notice, and the project was transitioned over to me for completion. Nate filled me in on the backstory and the progress so far, and I headed over to go meet Mike and introduce myself. Mike was a long-winded man. Once he got started talking, you couldn't get a word in. He told me all about how his wife embezzled millions of dollars from his business and ruined his life, and had a laundry list of complaints and horrible things to say about Nate. I could clearly see that Nate was not the problem here, and most likely neither was the wife. The common factor in all of these stories was Mike, and I was tasked with finishing his project with him still living in the home, and paying every bill he forwarded my way for him. 3 storage units, 2 mortgages, all his utilities, his past due HOA fees, his past due property taxes, all of it. Meanwhile, his wife never asked us to pay any of her bills and constantly questioned why we would pay his when half of that money would come from her on the back end when they sold the house and the final invoice was settled. She would refuse to sign, and then Mike would turn to their young adult children and tell them all about how she's trying to destroy his life. They would pressure her, and she would sign for the pass-throughs. This man was a manipulative con artist, and I was stuck in the middle of his latest scheme. It was incredibly uncomfortable. Nate was young with no family of his own and a wealthy father who could help him stay afloat through a job hunt. He was able to walk away, and I don't blame him for doing so. But I was almost 40 years old with a wife and daughter who count on my income and no wealthy family members to help me at all. I was stuck. Dealing with Mike was a requirement for my employment. At first, things went relatively smooth. Mike had broken Nate and took a sick pleasure in having accomplished that. He had some legitimate concerns with some of the work on his home that I gladly jumped on resolving. But he had a lot of other complaints that were not related to our contract, and therefore his problem to deal with. There were issues with the air conditioning Nothing I can do about that unless he wants to sign a change order. There were issues with the kitchen cabinets. Our contract only called for painting them. I can't do anything about a warped cabinet door unless he wants to pay for a replacement. There were multiple doors that had been previously kicked in and damaged, and he wanted us to replace. The contract only called for painting them. We would need a change order to replace them. He claimed the team damaged his washing machine, and now it leaks when he does laundry. We take a Matterport scan of every property before the contract is signed to document the current state, and you could clearly see the damage to the appliance in the images. His wife even verified that the washing machine had been a gift from Mike's father, who replaced it because it leaked, and that she had always had to put towels under it when she did laundry. Repeatedly, I would respectfully explain to him what I could and could not help him with under the terms of the current contract, and what I could help him with if he was willing to sign a change order. He would never proceed with the change orders and would never drop the issues. The items that were relevant to the contract would be resolved and marked off the list, but the extras were constantly a point of contention. He wasn't going to budge. This was his scam, and it was a constant source of discomfort. And the list goes on. He demanded a deep clean. This is a service we provide, but it wasn't one he paid for. We provided it anyway. He didn't like the mirrors. They were the exact mirrors from the material selection sheet that he approved before we ordered anything. We ended up swapping them out anyway. The HVAC system needed to be recharged and the capacitor replaced. This wasn't on the contract, but we did it anyway. Then there was the way he treated the trade partners. After weeks of denying a deep clean, we finally gave in and sent a cleaning crew out. Once they arrived, he gathered up all of his laundry and handed it to the cleaners, expecting them to do his laundry for him. One day, the trade partners were eating lunch, and Mike stuck his fingers in their food and helped himself to a snack. I had multiple trade partners who refused to return to the site unless Mike agreed to vacate while they worked. One day, I arrived for a scheduled site visit to catch Mike naked in the shower we had just finished building with all of the doors wide open. I closed the door, left the property, and sent him a message asking him to let me know when he's ready to walk the job with me. He called me back over and answered the door wearing nothing but a towel. It was the most uncomfortable job walk I have ever had to do. Eventually, a crew showed up to do the roof work. He had been able to get his insurance company to cover the roof replacement, but we soon discovered that his wife had called the insurance company to make sure the check would be sent to her since she didn't trust him to pay the roofers. This escalated to a huge fight through our online web portal where we communicate with stakeholders that went on for weeks. Soon, our entire team was eagerly watching the activity feed of this one project to see how the drama between these two former lovebirds was playing out. I'm unsure if the roofers ever did get paid. The project was completed a month late. With all the pass-throughs, the contract ballooned to $205,000. Upon reaching substantial completion, we cut Mike off from any more pass-throughs, which only angered him. We spent the next 3 months receiving daily app posts and emails from him threatening to sue us all. We spent the next 3 months receiving daily app posts and emails from him threatening to sue us all and demanding warranty work, most of which was not related to our contract. We gave in multiple times and sent new trade partners, the ones who knew Mike refused to return, to address all warranty concerns that were remotely relevant to our contract. But he was relentless in his pursuit to make me as uncomfortable as he possibly could, and he was damn good at it. Even his realtor, who was terrified of him, eventually terminated his listing agreement after being hospitalized from a panic attack. The house was initially listed at $1.5 million, which is about twice the actual value of the home, and to date is still on the MLS listed at a cool $1 million. Absorbing the impact. Dealing with Mike Oxmall was like navigating through a storm with nothing but a paper map. From the moment I took over his project, I knew it wouldn't be just another job. It was a test of my patience, professionalism, and sanity. When I first met Mike, armed with the knowledge of his less than stellar reputation, I decided to approach this project with a clear strategy. First, I instilled a routine of mindful breathing before every interaction. The moment I felt my frustration rising or his voice getting under my skin, I'd excuse myself, often by just stepping aside while allowing him to ramble and take 4 deep breaths. Inhale, hold, exhale. Simple, yet effective. It was my way of keeping my cool when Mike tried to push my buttons. I also adapted meditation as part of my daily routine. Every morning before work, I'd spend 10 minutes in silence, focusing on calmness. This practice was like mental armor. It prepared me for the day's inevitable confrontations. I'd visualize dealing with Mike in a calm, collected manner, which often translated into reality. Once I was at peace and ready to begin, I would open my inbox and dive into reading the ramblings of a madman I had received the night before. Mindfulness in communication became my mantra. I listened to Mike, not just to respond, but to understand. There were many days when he'd ramble on about issues that had nothing to do with our contract. I'd nod, acknowledge his concerns, but then gently steer the conversation back to what was actionable under our agreement. This technique kept our discussions from spiraling out of control. Every morning I'd define the problem. I would make a checklist from his demands and mark what was within the contract scope and what wasn't. I'd refer to this list when Mike demanded a deep clean or complained about his washing machine. I understand your concern, Mike, I'd say, but according to our contract, we can only address items listed here unless you agree to a change order. Setting boundaries was crucial. I made it a point to explain to Mike what we could and couldn't do without a change order. His face would turn red with frustration, but I stood my ground without playing into his trap. Over time, he started to grasp that I was not there to be bullied, but to execute the job we were contracted for. He would almost immediately forget the previous conversation and circle back to the same list of complaints, but I would just gently echo the previous conversation. I prioritized and scheduled my tasks meticulously. Mike's project was a time sink, but I allocated specific hours to deal with it. Anything beyond those hours was a strict no unless it was an emergency. This ensured I could manage my workload without letting Mike monopolize all my time. Documentation was my savior. Every conversation, decision, and change request was logged. When Mike accused us of not fulfilling our obligations, I had a paper trail to refute his claims. This not only kept him in check, but also protected our company's integrity. De-escalation was an art I learned on the job. When Mike's temper flared, I'd repeat our position calmly, like a broken record, until he either calmed down or moved on. As per our contract, Mike, we can only address, was my go-to line. It was monotonous, but effective. Another great line is, these are the parameters within which the contract allows me to work. That line is solid gold because it diverts his focus from me being the bad guy to the legally binding document he chose to sign. I also sought support from my colleagues and superiors. Sharing the burden of dealing with Mike made it less daunting. We'd have briefings where I'd vent, and they'd offer advice or sometimes just a listening ear, which was invaluable. Additionally, the company had provided us with a free subscription to Talkspace. Talkspace is a digital platform that offers an alternative to in-person therapy. You can get help with common mental health issues from a licensed therapist via live video sessions on your laptop, tablet, or smartphone. I had weekly video sessions with a licensed therapist that ended up being an opportunity to unpackage the stress Mike was causing me to someone who had great suggestions on how to cope, many of which you're reading about in these pages. Finally, I had an exit strategy. I knew this project would end, and I prepared for that end. When we reached substantial completion, I ensured we cut off the pass-throughs, anticipating Mike's backlash. And when it came, I was ready to defend our position, referring back to our well-documented interactions. Looking back, dealing with Mike was one of the toughest chapters of my career, but it taught me resilience, the importance of mental health practices, and how to manage professional boundaries with grace under fire. I walked away from the project not just as a survivor, but as someone who had grown, both professionally and personally. Coping with Hurricane Mike. Dealing with Mike was like being in the eye of a hurricane, where every moment felt like a battle for sanity. But I learned to navigate this storm with strategies that kept me afloat, not just in the project, but in my personal well-being too. First off, a professional distance became my lifeline. Mike had a way of making every interaction feel like a personal attack, but I reminded myself daily that his behavior was a reflection of his own chaos, not a judgment on my work. I tell myself, this isn't about me, it's about him. By not taking his tantrums personally, I managed to keep my professionalism intact, even when he was at his worst. To combat the stress, I turned to physical activity. I made it a point to take short walks around the block during my breaks. Mike lived in a beautiful neighborhood with a pond. His neighbors were lovely people who would often see me and want to stop me and ask me when they could expect to see him gone. They knew firsthand what a menace he was and had tons of hilarious anecdotes on what life is like living near ground zero. Sometimes when I could feel the tension building, I'd do a quick yoga session right in my office, focusing on stretching muscles in my back and legs to release stress. It was as if the tension was creating knots in my body that needed to be worked out. These activities cleared my mind, giving me a fresh perspective each time I returned to my desk. It was like resetting my mental state, preparing me to face Mike with a calm head. Journaling became my nightly ritual. Each evening, I'd pour out the day's events into my job log, writing about my encounters with Mike. I could process the day's frustrations in a therapeutic way. It wasn't just about venting, it was about understanding my reactions, recognizing my growth, and sometimes even laughing at the absurdity of it all. This practice not only helped me cope, but also gave me insights into how I was handling the situation, showing me my strengths and areas where I could improve, while also acting as a log of events that I could reference when he started to lie about how an interaction had played out. Lastly, time management was crucial. Mike could easily consume all my time if I let him, but I was strict. I allocated specific hours for dealing with his project, ensuring that I didn't neglect other responsibilities or let his demands overrun my day. I used timers, set clear boundaries on availability, and prioritized tasks so that even on the days when Mike was at his most demanding, I could manage my time effectively, keeping a balance that preserved my sanity. These strategies weren't just about surviving Hurricane Mike. They were about thriving despite him. They taught me resilience, how to keep my peace amidst chaos, and how to manage not just a project, but my own mental health in the face of adversity. By employing these strategies, you can better manage the stress and discomfort associated with dealing with a challenging client like Mike, ensuring both your mental health and professional integrity are maintained. This chapter really hits home on why comfort in project management is a myth. The thing is, projects are like living organisms. They change, they evolve, they throw curveballs when you least expect them. One day you might think that you've got everything under control, and the next, your client wants a complete overhaul, or your team dynamics shift, or your materials don't arrive on time. It's like trying to relax in a chair that is being pulled out from underneath you. And why should we embrace this discomfort? Well, think of it this way. Every project challenge is a chance to grow. Just like the quote from Conor McGregor, the more you seek the uncomfortable, the more you will become comfortable. It's about getting used to the chaos, learning to dance with it. That's where innovation and personal growth happen.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. May God have mercy on your soul.
So I had this, wild experience with Mike, and let's just say that he was a walking, talking lesson in discomfort. He was chaos personified, with an endless list of demands, many outside of our contract, and a knack for just making everyone around him feel like they're losing their minds. He was a con artist. He had a past that, flew red flags all over the place. But we took him on to help him through his divorce and his home renovation. And dealing with Mike required that mental bulletproof vest, like the one that Evie Pomporis talks about in Becoming Bulletproof. Each layer of that vest, for me, represented, a strategy, a new way of handling stress and difficult people. So for me, that was setting boundaries, documenting every interaction, practicing mindfulness, and not taking his personal attacks to heart. It was about keeping my cool and prioritizing mental health and staying focused on what we were actually contracted to do.
Moving on, I see you added a few things under finance.
Yes, section B, line F, party A, that's me. Should not solely be expected, required, or responsible for the following, but not limited to meals, vacations, gas, rent, or any situation where a group suggests splitting the check and Venmoing me later.
Okay, well, I'm an independent woman, so that shouldn't be a problem. However, if a meal is specified as a date beforehand, party A, that's you, is responsible for all financial costs involved.
Agreed?
So the takeaways: embracing discomfort isn't about enjoying it. It's about learning to navigate through it. It's about becoming resilient and adaptable, and maybe even a bit wiser with each project hurdle. So when you're feeling the heat from a project that's pushing your limits, remember, you're not just surviving, you're growing. That's the real comfort in project management, knowing that with each uncomfortable situation, you're getting better at your craft. So that's a wrap for today's review of my book, The Hard Knock School of Project Management, 7 Hard Lessons I Learned the Hard Way. Remember, in project management, as in life, the most uncomfortable moments are often where we find our greatest growth. So stay tuned for more lessons from the School of Hard Knocks.
Flip the pages, take a peek. It's time to dive in every week. Hard Knock, you got brains on fleek. Book of the week.
Okay, welcome back to the Hard Knock University podcast. We're going to move on to our next segment where we not only shake hands with discomfort, but learn to dance with it. Today, I want to dive into our book of the week, What You Do Is Who You Are, by Ben Horowitz, and explore how its lessons resonate with project management and embracing change and dealing with discomfort. First off, let's talk about the book. Ben Horowitz, a seasoned tech entrepreneur and venture capitalist, delves into the essence of company culture. He argues that culture isn't about what you say, it's about what you do, especially during those uncomfortable and challenging times. For project managers, this translates to how we handle those moments when everything seems to go south, like scope changes, team conflicts, or project setbacks. It's in these moments that our leadership style, our project management philosophy truly comes to light. Embracing discomfort here means making tough calls, supporting your team, and maintaining integrity even when it's the hardest thing to do. Horowitz brings up Shaka Senghor's story, which really resonates with me. Shaka, while in prison, transformed his life by embracing the discomfort of self-reflection and change. In project management, we can draw some parallels here. So when projects go off track or face unforeseen challenges, it's not just about fixing problems, it's about evolving as a team and learning from discomfort and perhaps changing the way that we work. Another interesting point Horowitz makes is about the samurai code of conduct. He uses this to illustrate how leaders can define and instill culture. In project management, this could mean establishing a code for how we deal with change, with courage, respect, and an unwavering commitment to the project's success, even when it's uncomfortable. There's a balance Horowitz talks about between empathy and the hard truths, which he calls tough love. In project management, this means sometimes having difficult conversations about performance, project direction, or changes that might be uncomfortable but necessary for growth. It's about fostering an environment where feedback is a tool for improvement, not criticism. When you think about it, when you're dealing with the discomfort of a project pivot, or when your team is resisting a new methodology, Horowitz's lessons remind us that how we navigate these changes defines us. It's about leading by example, showing resilience, and adapting with purpose. Personally, I found that the moments when I've had to push through discomfort, whether it was acknowledging a project failure or pivoting strategy, have been the most defining. These moments, much like Horowitz describes, are where you prove what you do is who you are. So What You Do Is Who You Are isn't just a book about business culture. It's a manual for anyone in project management looking to understand how to lead through discomfort and change. It teaches us that our true nature as leaders is revealed in how we handle the tough, the uncomfortable, and the unpredictable. And with that, we'll take a short break, but stay tuned because next up, we've got an incredible conversation with Todd Roth where we'll explore even more about navigating life's discomforts through the lens of music and craftsmanship. Don't go anywhere. This is the Hard Knock University podcast. All right. Welcome back to the Hard Knock University podcast. We're diving into the art of embracing discomfort, and who better to talk about navigating life's challenges than someone who's done it through blues music and craftsmanship. Joining us today is Todd Roth, a blues musician and an artisan luthier based out of Bastrop, Texas. Todd's journey in music and the craft of making guitars is a testament to creativity, resilience, and the kind of uncomfortable learning that shapes both artists and entrepreneurs. Welcome, Todd.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you, brother. Let's start with your story. How did you go from, playing the blues to building instruments?
So in my family, all the men are going back generations they're tradesmen and craftsmen. We all going back 3 or 4 generations on both sides of the family. Everybody fixed something. On my dad's side, it was farmers. I think my great-grandfather on my dad's side actually was a grave digger. So really manual stuff. But farmers, as you well know, end up fixing a lot of their own stuff out of necessity. On the other side, we had blacksmiths, carpenters. I had a grandfather that owned a printing press, which is it's not a thing anymore unless you're doing a boutique, book launch.
The internet of the 18th century.
Yeah, the letter drawers and the typesetting, machines loaded with ink and steel bits that will take off a finger just as soon as do what they were supposed to do. So, and he had to work on all that stuff. You didn't have, you didn't call down, you didn't look in the newspaper want ads or, or in the back of the phone book and for the guy that fixed your printing press. You just had to do it. My father is a mechanic and a body man. He built wrecks and custom cars and motorcycles. And when it came down to, some people, the way they grew up is, oh, we had a guy for that. Or we were the guy for that. Yeah. My whole family, we fixed our own stuff. And if they didn't, it was somebody else in the family that fixed their stuff. So I grew up, my very first electric guitar, I tore it all apart, put it back together again. My very first acoustic guitar, when the bridge flew off, because it was really, really poorly made. I scavenged some parts from a buddy and put a floating bridge with a trapeze tailpiece on it because I knew that wouldn't fly off. So going back to, 1987 maybe, is how long I've been working on guitars. I have never been to a luthier school. Everything I've done in the luthier arts has been some through trial and error and some through just experience in woodworking. The uncomfortable part is sometimes taking on a job that can seem really daunting or a little out of my lane and then figuring it out.
We'll get further into the discomfort later.
Oh, yeah. But how did
your experience as a musician influence your decision to become a luthier?
Fixing my own stuff every time it broke, and then you're playing a gig and your bass player has a problem, so you fix his stuff, and then you're doing a show with multiple bands and somebody else's guitar player has an issue or, drummer's missing a part for his drums, and so you just realize that you have that I realized at some point that I had a skill set that was that could work off the stage as well. And as a blues musician, you can count on one hand the number of blues musicians out there that truly are making a real living from just playing the blues. It's not a terribly lucrative thing. It has highs and lows, and being flexible with my workshop hours and having something at the end of the day that I can hold and say, I did that. I fixed that. That goes hand in hand with creating music. I have created something that at the end of the day, I can go, I did that. Not running a sales report or, wondering what kind of storm is going to hit me tomorrow when I go into my retail job, or, the years I was in the culinary world where also there, in addition to being a chef, I fixed a lot of our equipment in the kitchen because I could do it faster than wait for a purchase order or a repair order from corporate if I just broke out my wrenches and just handled it.
And I like how you draw the parallel between playing music and building guitars. And it sounds like, you eventually got to where you went from just repairing your own stuff to maybe doing some setups and things like that for yourself and maybe other people, to out of the need to diversify because it's so hard to make money as a musician, building custom guitars and putting them out there online, and at craft shows and things like that, just out of the need to make an extra buck.
That's where the germ was planted when I realized that I could customize my own stuff and I could fix my own stuff. And that, that's where the germ or the seed was planted in the idea that I could make a swing at this. And the business is still growing, certainly. I'm not where I need to be, but it's coming. But like you said, the need to diversify, sometimes supersedes our ability to diversify. And in my case, I had the ability to work parallel with my gigs, and because I can have business hours during the week here at the guitar shop, and because I write my own schedule and I do work for myself, I can. Nope, I'm not going to be here Friday. Why? Well, because I'm driving to Mississippi to play a weekend worth of shows. That kind of having that flexibility is very, very important to me. Not just so that I can be my own boss, but so that I have that peace of mind that I can accomplish all the things that I want to do.
Share a moment in your music career where you had to embrace discomfort to grow or achieve something significant.
Let's see. To achieve something significant, because
don't worry about having to think for a second, because I can always edit some of that out.
Yeah. As far as a defining moment that pushed me in a certain direction, I think it was being the awkward harmonica guy that was getting a little bit, that was just.
You mean the misery
whistle? I was the misery whistle guy. I admit it. I was that guy. I got scolded by someone I was dating. Don't be that guy.
Every harmonica player started out as that guy.
And some realize don't be that guy. The ones that do, I think, realize that they have a mentor who I don't know that every harmonica player, but most. And when a dear departed friend of mine, Jeff Norwood, shortly before he passed, he says to me, Todd, you didn't used to be worth a shit on harmonica. And that was like the greatest compliment I ever got, because getting a compliment out of a bluesman is like,
and so it always lies under a slight insult,
Well, it's always been. There's never like, oh, you're so good at this. Thank you for being a part of the scene. No, it's, wow, you used to suck. Meaning you're really doing it now. And, I think the biggest step when I was honing or shaping what I do, let's call it that, shaping what I do. I had been doing like open mic nights and stuff like that, and just going out and swinging for the fences. And then I ended up on the main stage at the House of Blues way sooner than I probably should have. In hindsight, it wasn't that big of a deal, but at the time it was a huge deal. Getting to play the stage that, the likes of Eddie Van Halen and Willie Nelson had strode across, and Billy Gibbons, it was like, wow, this is a big deal. In hindsight, you realize the House of Blues is just a bar. It doesn't matter which House of Blues, it's a house, but don't get me wrong, if the House of Blues said, we want you to open for Kev Mo, I'd be like, yeah, I'll be there. Don't misunderstand that. Anybody from House of Blues that's listening, my number will be in the links. So I was playing a buddy of mine coined the term menu venue, which is, a bar and restaurant that has a live music. Some friends of mine and I started calling it acoustic wallpaper, because you're part of the scene. You're part of the ambiance. You're not necessarily there. No one's there for a show. You're there to create an atmosphere. Yeah. You and I have talked, I think, in the past about, anybody can throw a party and put a speaker on, but when you have a band, now you've created an event and there's value there. So I was playing a menu venue one night, and the owner of the venue came up to me, and I was doing your regular staple of acoustic classic rock covers, from like Bob Seger and CCR and stuff like that. Original sprinkling of Robert Johnson and Son House, as I am want to do. I had the owner of the venue come up to me, and he says, when you do the blues stuff, it seems like it's where you really land. And it was the uncomfortableness of doing the songs that I thought was expected of me, because that's what everybody was doing. And of course, the world needs another version of Smoke on the Water, right? That was a moment of, aha, I got to pick a lane. And you had to do stuff you didn't necessarily want to do to realize that you needed a lane, and to maybe even realize that there was a lane for you, instead of, hey, we're all just floating this lazy river on our own, we're all in the same, but we're not. I lean into the blues side of things. Even when I do, what people would consider classic Americana, it comes out like a blues song, because that's the world I inhabit, and there's a lot of moments along the way where you go like, oh, that didn't work, and I think, there's so many lessons in there, Mark, that were like, embrace the uncomfortable to learn a hard truth. And it's, work with a booking agent that knows what you do. you know, and knows where to put you. Taking a blues rock duo to Fort Worth to play in the Stockyards on a Friday night because the owner loves the blues. Well, the owner left before we started playing. What difference does that make?
Yeah.
Cool. I lost money on this gig. I put $30 in the gas tank. I paid the drummer 37, and I went home hungry. So that's a lesson. When the booking agent calls, do your due diligence. Look into the venue. If she or he, as a booking agent, is getting a commission, they don't care where they put you, because 10% of nothing is nothing. So they got to be pounding the pavement and putting you out there to work.
Thing is, the check clears the bank.
Yeah, and to us, it's like, well, why would I play to an audience that doesn't want to hear me?
Yeah.
And
tell me the most challenging aspect of making guitars and how you overcome the challenges that you face in doing so, and how could you relate that to project management in terms of problem solving?
That's heavy loaded. Keeping track of your expenses and not undervaluing your time, I think, are the two biggest lessons that I've learned as a luthier and as a guitar tech is having a working knowledge at your fingertips. In the automotive industry, you have a crash estimating guide. Crash estimating guide says it takes 6 hours to change the spark plug in a 1987 Fiero, and that's what the tech.
Is there a guide that tells you how much time it takes to set up a Floyd Rose?
No, there's not. And the thing with an instrument like that is, on any given day, the strings are going to behave differently, and it's like this. Say this client comes in and he's playing Billy Gibbons 7.5s on his Floyd Rose, which, by the way, wouldn't work in my estimation of the physics of that particular problem. But say you got one guy comes in, he's playing 8s or 9s with his guitar with Floyd Rose. The next guy comes in and he's playing, 12 to 68s because he tunes down a step and a half and then drops the low string on top of that. Now you've got a whole nother ball of issues because of string tensions and blah, 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 and all that. And so there's no hard and fast rule. There are tools that do make those jobs easier, and that can't be understated. The trouble with that is that up until very, very recently, there was like one source for all those tools, and they knew it and charged accordingly. And not all tools are created equal. A lot of us joke about hobo freight or harbor freight. My thought process was, for the marketing guys over there, that maybe they should suggest that when it absolutely positively has to look like the tool you need, call Harbor Freight. We disparage and we joke a lot, but they have levels. You get the bargain basement, dozen screwdrivers for $8 kind of thing. You should probably expect what you get out of that. So
What you pay for.
Yeah.
So there's this thing in project management and construction in general called the triple constraint, where you've got time frame, quality, and cost, and you can have two of those. Like, you can have fast and cheap, but it's not gonna be good. You can have good and fast, but it ain't gonna be cheap.
Well, that phrase is, there's a certain phrase that goes around about that a lot, and you see it on the wall in every tattoo parlor, and it's good tattoos ain't cheap and cheap tattoos ain't good. And the same thing goes for the work. If you want cheap guitar work, probably ain't good. It might get you through the gig, but it probably ain't good. And good guitar work, it ain't cheap. It's a skill, and to be able to do some of the things that I do as quickly as I can, and not the least of which is the investment in tools. There's very, very specialized tools in this process to get things dialed in, to the degree that professionals demand. Now, am I trying to discourage, home enthusiasts from fixing their own stuff? Nope, not at all. I want you to fix your own stuff. That's how I learned. I'm here to help the hobbyist get through. I'm here to help the pro who just simply doesn't have time. And I'm here to help the pro that doesn't have the desire to work on their stuff. There are legions of professional touring musicians that barely know one end of the guitar from the other. They play, they have no concept of how the instrument is put together or how to fix it. And I'm not disparaging them, because they're playing for 10,000 people every night, but there's other guys who will not stop tinkering with their stuff. The Misters Van Halen are a great example of, probably the penultimate example of a nonstop tinkerer, who went above and beyond to craft their personal sound and style.
And a lot of these
You
guys
know.
that are playing these, stadiums and shit, they're relying on consistency in their tone across multiple venues that might have different setups
And different electricity and different
Yeah.
sizes. There's so many.
So
There's
these
so
guys
many
have guitar
variables.
techs on staff that
Yes.
are just amazing luthiers in their own right. Listen, and being self-employed in both music and lutherie, comes with a unique set of challenges. How do you manage the discomfort of uncertainty in your career?
Whiskey, yes. I try to keep an open mind, and I try to stay positive, and I'm always looking for, it sounds dirty when you say it, but it's a side hustle. I think I just added a guitar student today. So, I'm trying to get back into teaching a little bit, and it's, trying to staying positive that this is going to work and it's going to happen, and just keeping the grind on. I'm pretty terrible at self-promotion through everything. It's getting better, but I'm pretty bad at it. But I think just looking for the next gig and looking for the next fix, that sounds like a junkie move, next repair job and the next custom job, and always dreaming up the next custom job in my head. I mean, if I could finish the 4 custom guitars that I'm working on right now that aren't commissions, they're simply, I dreamed this up, I have the parts, I'm going to build it, I just need to wrap them up. But life gets in the middle, and my home shop, is insulated like a colander, so it isn't always the easiest to work in. So I'm a little bit of a slave to the Texas weather. I do try to have some semblance of personal life, and I got to do the commissions. I have to do the things that I was hired to do before I get back to my own things. And that's key, is getting my stuff, that I'm on the hook for, the repair jobs that come into the shop, as well as the repair jobs that come into my home shop. Those always take precedence over my own projects.
So you hustle.
So I hustle. Not as much as I probably should, but I do hustle. And that's really how to get through it. There's no magic bullet. There's no secret. Just you grind, and you just grind. Yeah.
You make connections, you talk to people, you wheel and deal.
Yeah.
So in both music and, crafting guitars and such, mistakes can be incredibly educational. Can you talk about a mistake that you've made in either field that led to a valuable lesson? A hard lesson that you learned the hard way?
One of the hard lessons I learned as far as being on stage is that story I told you about going to Fort Worth, play the Stockyards. That was a lesson learned for sure. Definitely there's some detail things. I was joking with somebody in the shop yesterday that I broke a volume knob on a guitar one time because it wasn't plugged in at the amp, and I kept turning the volume thinking I had something going on. That was a not inexpensive lesson. In the shop, I learned a difficult lesson. I don't know if I learned. I had a guitar.
For the sake of this forum, let's continue.
Well, I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is I had a guitar on the bench today that came in a day or two ago, and for a setup, and there was some kind of wonkiness going on with one pickup. And after changing out the entire switch plate, I went back and changed the pickup out, and now it works. And I should have started at the pickup because it didn't make any sense. The issue it was having didn't make any sense, but it was a really inconsistent noise. And unfortunately, much like working on a car, sometimes you just start hanging parts, and you start with the cheap stuff and you work your way up. And, so now I'm several hours into this job that only pays me for an hour. And it was like, that's a tough lesson, because where is the lesson? What should I just change the pickup out first? I've called the client and said, hey man, your guitar's junk, take it back. I mean, it's not an old guitar, and he bought it sight unseen and came into our shop for a little bit of tune-up, a setup actually. And in the process of setting it up, the owner of this shop said, hey, there's something wrong with the neck pickup. And there was definitely something wrong with the neck pickup, which I still haven't really sorted out. I replaced it.
It sounds like the lesson here is sometimes you have to have an uncomfortable situation where somebody might have paid for, you know, $100 setup, and now, hey man, we're talking about a $300 pickup swap, you know?
Yeah, because you're in for, you know, $150 for a pickup, and you're in for my labor, and and on top of that, we changed out the volume pot, tone pot, three-way switch, neck pickup, you know, and labor. And we still ain't got to the setup. We're just working on the issue.
Can you speak to having to have those uncomfortable conversations when, you know, things didn't quite go to plan?
Yes, I had a guitar come in that needed a binding repair, and the binding was fighting me. And every time I would glue it and come back, I'd take the tape off and it would have separated. So I'd have to clean the glue out that I put in, warm the whole thing up, start the process over again. And you know, that was I used the wrong glue. I should have called someone and gotten them some advice. Instead, I did what I know to do, and it bit me in the butt, you know, and I worked my ass off on a guitar that, you know, I mean, it was significant binding damage where it was an acoustic guitar. The binding had just come undone, and it just, you know, I chased it for, you know, days. You know, I come in, I do one side, I come in the next day, check my work, you know, after the glue dried, and it just had completely gone back to where it was. And it was just a fight from start to finish. It was a happy day when I delivered the guitar, but, you know, sometimes don't trust your gut. You know, oh, this worked before. Well, do some diligence. You know, do your research, make sure that you understand the process that you're about to undertake. Even if you've done it before, every guitar is different. You know, we don't know what glue they came from the factory with, you know, how much glue is in there. We don't know if it was sealed with acetone and it didn't take, or was it, you know, some other kind of glue. It's just you know, every guitar is different.
Next week's episode is on the idea that you often don't have all the answers, and that, you know, omniscience is a myth in any.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't care how long you've been doing a thing. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing a thing. You're gonna catch a curveball every time. There's gonna be a curveball comes up, and I've warned the owner of this shop when he comes back. Oh, this is an easy one. No, it's not. There's no easy ones. There's no easy ones. If you say it, it's definitely not going to be easy.
So,
you know, that's
apropos to curveballs. How do you adapt to changes in the music industry or the craft of lutherie? And what strategies do you use to remain relevant and innovative?
Whiskey again. Here's the thing: is the more something changes, the more it stays the same. One of the things in luthiery and guitar tech, you know, in guitar craft, on the repair side of things that changes is when we go from potentiometers to circuit boards. And much like in the automotive industry, where we could, you know, change this or change that and everything, we could clean this part and all of a sudden everything would work. Now the circuitry is so small, there's no fixing. You know, this is burned up, but you got to throw it away, start over again.
Yeah, but isn't it so much easier to just swap out a fuel injection control model than it is to tune 4 carburetors that are all trying to line up to each other?
Listen, my truck has 3 carburetors. I feel like I don't need this negativity in my life. So I'm not disagreeing with that particular statement. What I'm saying is that that's one way that we've had to adapt, is because not everything is fixable. You know, I've had to develop relationships with pickup manufacturers and preamp manufacturers because these products have, I'm not going to say they have C issues. I'm going to say they have a shelf life almost.
Yeah, if the winding breaks in a pickup, that thing's trash.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And pickups can be rewound. I don't want to do it. There are guys that do it, and they're very good at what they do. And the guys that make custom pickups, the men and women out there making custom pickups, I salute you. I don't have any desire to do that.
But that goes back to something like rewinding a pickup, you know, in a time when, you know, shipping and everything we didn't have the infrastructure we do today. Would have been a necessity, you know, take it to a guy in town and wind it. But now,
to that point, if you've got a true vintage instrument, and I don't mean you got your dad's 80s Epiphone. I mean, if you've got, you know, a 50s Fender or a 50s Gibson or
Les Paul that has original bobbins.
Yeah, you want the original bobbins. Exactly. You want that originality. You want that to still be there. Does it make it better? No. Does it make it more true to the original? To a point, absolutely. So there is still a need for that. I think the changes in this industry, some are for the better with more sustainable woods and things like that. I'm finding more and more local builders using locally sourced wood. Now, is it as amazing as, you know, a $10,000 custom shop Martin with Adirondack spruce top? Nope. Is it a good guitar? Yes. And, you know, that's the thing, is I love seeing builders use what's around I don't have a beef with an electric guitar made out of pallet wood. I love, I've got a local client who I know he's got some big pines on his property, and we're talking about, he's got a big old chunk, and we're talking about slabbing out a T-style body for him. I love those ideas. And so they advances in that kind of luthiery where it's more commonplace to find custom built guitars from different regions of the world using locally sourced materials, as opposed to having to creep through, the backwaters of different places to find that one guy that's building weird stuff that's amazing. Now it's like, it's easy to find. Yeah, you go to Reverb, or and it's there. And as far as on the music side, as things change, I simply have to stay true to what I do and hope that my audience finds me. I do push in some directions, but because of what I play, I don't know that the audiences in different social medias are ever going to glom onto what I do. And navigating playlist creation and things like that on different streaming services, that's something that I'm in the process of learning right now to boost. Because even, the demographic that listens to the music that I play, most of them do subscribe to some kind of streaming service. Sometimes they don't even realize it. If you get a Prime membership, yeah, that means you get Prime Music. You should look it up. Kind of, but I still have the diehards. My mom is like, I haven't got your last album. I'm like, yeah, because I didn't do a physical release. I don't have a physical copy of it. You have to get it online. It's digital. But that's proving more challenging navigating those changes. I was talking with a producer a couple days ago, and we were joking about, he discovered a company that prints vinyl on demand, and I'm going to look into that so that there will be some Coming Up Muddy music in the future on vinyl.
I have seen a lot more of that starting to pop up where there used to be none of it.
I think there's some technology that's caught up, and somebody out there said, hey, there's a market for these one-off albums.
There absolutely is.
Yeah, and there totally is. I mean, I want it just for me, my album. Like, hey, this is my record.
Yeah. So it sounds like a big challenge is that your target audience tends to be, baby boomers that are having a hard time with the technology end of it. And so you've got to, navigate that issue and find ways to bring the media to them, because they're not going to find it the traditional ways that people are consuming music today.
Now, and I'm kind of, I'm generalizing a little bit, but that's kind of the truth is that, the fans I have that are my age, and I don't know if I've got any fans that are younger than me, but the fans that I have that are my age, they have no problem finding my music. They want more. They're hungry for more. As limited of an audience as they are, they're wanting more music, and they have found it. But it's it's the boomer age, the retirees that love what I do because it takes them back to a certain time. They struggle sometimes to find my music because they don't subscribe to Apple Music or the Devil or Prime or anything. And they're just like, if it's not on wax or a CD, then, I don't know I don't know how to listen to that.
So how do you balance?
No, I don't have it.
So tell me how you go about balancing the creative aspect of your work with the business side, especially when it comes to uncomfortable decisions like pricing your guitars or choosing gigs.
I try to compartmentalize. When it comes to pricing guitars, I'm still learning that. The labor I've been able to I price out. I have a labor rate that we charge the shop. And that's how I base that from. Plus, if I'm building something from scratch, I look into what I've got invested in parts. I don't really have like a flat markup on parts. I kind of, I'm one of those guys, like if I paid $20 for a part, give me 25, that kind of thing. It's just to cover shipping or whatever, and then try to make a little bit on my labor. As far as pricing out the music, I am terribly guilty of underselling my music and what I do on that side. The creative end of it, I put in its own box. Okay. The creative side where I'm writing and, working on licks and riffs and stuff like that, I keep that here. I try to keep that separate because if you let the two bleed over, it sucks the life out of the creative end of it. I try to record as inexpensively as possible when possible. And I like to spend money on mixing because I think if you've got a good vibe in a studio, a good mix will make the production that much better.
Sure.
But as far as trying to put a dollar amount on the creative side, I can't. I have to just put that in its box. And this is like, okay, we're going to make this record. We're going to make it the best we can. Then we'll figure out the costs kind of thing. It's not responsible, but that's how I've had to do it. Or else I'd lose my sanity. As far as booking gigs, I have a minimum, and I also will balance that based on how far do I have to drive, how long is the gig, is it indoors, is it outdoors, what do I have to bring, those kinds of things. And then there are some that I'm like, I'm not going to travel that far for that gig anymore. I just can't do it. I can't justify. I had some hill country gigs that I used to play that, leaving from Bastrop and doing these marathon gigs that would turn into an 8-hour day, and it would net me like $250 gross, not net, gross. And I'm like, well, I just can't justify doing this anymore. So that was really funny, because the following year, after I played my run of shows for this particular venue, she came back to me and said, I got you a raise and you're playing shorter sets. I was like, holy cow, and then it made it worth it again, but playing a 4-hour show that's 2 hours from home, you have to get top dollar for that, because it's a full day. Mm-hmm. And it's not like, it's really hard to compare the energy output, because we talk a lot, other musicians and I, and you've experienced this, Mark, you've played shows, is the energy that you put out in performing a show is so much different than the energy that you put out working a 9-to-5 job. And for lots of different reasons, you might be depressed at your 9-to-5 and it's a grind and you have to just get through the day. Right. But you're only, if you're lucky, you're only half hour from home. It's no big deal. And you didn't drag a bunch of shit with you, but when you have a 4-hour gig and you're at a place that it's not a show, it's just a gig, and you're putting all this energy out to express yourself and to do honor to the musicians that came before you and that built this path for you to build the road on, to do the music justice and to try to bring that joy. Because I don't know about you, but when I play music, I feel joy. I love playing, love picking up an instrument and, oh, that was music that just came out of my hands. This is so cool.
Yeah.
To try to convey that joy to 200 people that don't give a shit that you're there. Maybe 2 of them are noticing you. Man, it's an energy just vacuum. And now you got to pack up your stuff.
But when those 200 people give you a standing ovation, that.
Yeah, there's no feeling like that. There's nothing like that. And, and it makes you sound shallow and selfish when you're like, but it's it's not about the applause. It's that I connected. It's the connection. It's not about the performance. It's about the connection. And I know musicians who are like that. They bathe themselves in the glory of the performance, and they haven't connected with anyone. And they take it super personal when people don't respond, and I'm like, I do this for me. Did you like it? Awesome. High fives all around. So, that's part of it, is realizing that I do this for me. Playing music is for me, and it sounds selfish, but once you have that connection and you make that connection, that's what you're searching for over and over again, is that person sitting at the bar bobbing their head to this thing that I created. There is nothing like that in it, whether it's, like you said, 200 people standing ovation or 4 people at the bar going, that was fucking badass, dude. Thank you so much. It's the same feeling.
Yeah. Somebody once said that, I'm often down on, the top 40, Billboard stuff.
There's a reason.
Yeah. And I think I was, talking shit about, Morgan Wallen or something. And somebody said, somebody said, that guy has connected, with over 1 million people through his music. And, that's great. But maybe I don't want to connect with 1 million people. Maybe I want to connect with, that guy at the bar who's having a shitty day and, got in a fight with his goldfish and needs,
I don't make Walmart friendly music. And I think we're at a level in consumerism where the algorithms have figured out what it takes to sell to the most people. Now, granted, on any given day, whatever's dominating the news cycle will impact that algorithm. And, and that'll impact what's going on Music Row and things like that. And I'm certainly no music insider, so I can't sit here and proselytize on what the AI and the algorithms are doing to promote this artist versus this artist. And to be fair, I don't think I've ever, I mean, not since high school have I ever been really into anything that might be called popular music. I certainly can see a pop artist and see what the appeal is in many aspects. A lot of the country pop side of things, I have trouble with that because I don't see a lot of substance from my end. You know, not that I haven't written silly songs, and I'm not saying that these songs were written to be silly, but when you strip away the production and you're left with truck go vroom vroom, gun go boom boom. It's like, what is, I don't even know what's happening here. And like you said, I'd rather connect with that guy at the bar who had a shitty day. I'd rather brighten his day. And when I'm playing a gig and someone asks me for insert your favorite blues artist here, then I know that they're actually listening. I was in a band with a guy, I was a stunt player in a band, a fill-in player for a friend's band, and we were hanging out on break, and this young lady comes up. She says, "You guys play electric slide?" We're like, "What? Like, were you even listening?" It was like all night long. It's been like Muddy Waters and and Johnny Winter and stuff, and she's wanting a disco tune. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I am really confused right now. Have you been here?
Yeah. Just got there and realized there's a band. I'm gonna make a
there's a band. I'm sure they can play my favorite song. And the other biggest frustration is that people who just assume we're a jukebox because we've got a guitar around us that of course you got to know it. The song's so easy. Everybody knows it. I'm not everybody. I've never had any desire to learn that song. And you pointing it out doesn't necessarily make me want to learn it right now. And, I'm not beefing on that. It is what it is. People want to hear what they want to hear.
But it's a source of discomfort,
It is definitely a source of discomfort when someone is shouting at you from 10 feet away to play a song by an artist that you don't know any of their songs. I mean, it's like, I'm an old chubby bearded guy and somebody's hollering at me to do a Taylor Swift song. I'm like, what? Are we in the same room? I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. So, I want to be respectful of your time, and I still got a handful of questions. Okay. So making a guitar from start to finish is a project in itself. Can you walk us through how you
many projects?
Yeah. Can you walk us through the project management end of it? How would you manage this project from conceptualization to delivery, and where you feel the most pressure or the most discomfort?
The most discomfort, I guess I'm gonna start backwards, because the most discomfort is when I've created an unrealistic deadline for myself. The last thing I want to do is overpromise and underdeliver. So I always try to be on the other side of that coin, is to underpromise and overdeliver. As far as managing the process, my process for building a guitar is probably different than a number of builders. Lots of people, and you and I have come across this in the cigar box guitar community, is they're assemblers. They're not necessarily builders. They collect bits and pieces and then put them together based on something they saw on the internet. And, and when it comes to certain designs, parts casters, things like that, we're simply trying to personalize on Leo Fender's original idea. And when it comes to a project like that, it all starts with, if it's a commission piece, then the question is, what do you want to do with this instrument? What are you hoping to gain from commissioning this custom piece? Are you looking for something that's deeply personal? Are you looking for something that does something for your guitar collection that nothing you have, nothing off the shelf will do? Is it an aesthetic thing, or is it a tone thing? And then you go from there and you decide, what am I gonna, depending on the job, am I buying a guitar body? Am I upcycling a guitar body? Am I making one from this expensive rare hardwood that it only grows and can be harvested under a full moon, by a naked virgin? That last part costs extra. It's really hard to find a virgin lumberjack that's willing to be naked.
A good Sawyer that is also a virgin.
Yeah. Generally, they got to be at a certain point in their life, and you expect, that ship has sailed. So, you start with the client and what they expect from the build. Now, if it's something I'm building for myself, it's just something that popped into my head at 3:00 in the morning while I couldn't sleep, and went, oh, I should do this thing. What is this thing? Oh, it's an 8-string baritone with a resonator. That's a great idea. Yeah, we got to put a humbucker in the neck and a push-pull pot. It's got to do all these other things. How's that going? Well, it's been 8 years. Oh, there it is right there. It's not doing nothing. There's a piece of it at home, and so I'm here. So, it's because I approach everything from a very bespoke standpoint. It's, where do we start? Somebody brings me a guitar and says, give me the works. All right, let's talk. What are we going to do? Maybe you want to do these punk pop, and so you want a Strat body that weighs nothing, and you want one humbucker. No problem.
Yeah. Also, what's your budget?
We got that.
it's important, you know?
Yeah. What's your budget? You know, how much do you want to spend on this project? You know,
and,
that's,
and do you need it by a deadline? Because that also plays.
Well, that affects the price too, because if you need it by, you know, less time than I really want to invest in it, well, then I got to put you at the top of the queue. And there's a whole bunch, you know, there's other clients ahead of you right now. So, yes, you want to get in the front, it's going to cost you. You know, it's like being a bully at the water fountain. And you want to get up front, it's going to cost you a nickel. You know, so there's certainly that. It's just about not only managing what you got invested, but also managing expectations. You know, and that's why it's important to have a really good relationship with the client and understand that, you know, understanding your own limitations, the client understanding the limitations of the instrument and the limitations of the wood, you know, and understanding your personal limitations in that, yeah, I know you saw that really cool art guitar at NAMM last year. I don't know how to build that. You know, being honest with your clients, being honest with yourself. You know, if a job's too much, don't take it on. You know, there's no shame in saying, I'm sorry, I don't think I'm the right guy for that project. You know, somebody wants to build, you know, a double top, you know, classical guitar, you know, from exotic hardwoods. I'm probably not the guy. You know, I don't even have the tools to do something like that. But, you know, you want a badass rock and roll machine? I got you.
So
you know,
for someone stepping into a field, you know, where they feel uncomfortable, like a new project manager or an aspiring musician or luthier, what advice would you give them on embracing that comfort, that discomfort?
you got to live in it. You got to inhabit it. And because no growth happens without some kind of external stimulus. You know, you know, when you're a kid and you're 10, 12, 13 years old and you're laying in bed at night and your knees are just screaming in agony because you're growing. It's uncomfortable because you're growing. You know, when you sit down to practice that new, you know, play that new guitar you got, or excuse me, we're gonna edit that out. When you sit down to practice your guitar and you're like, oh my God, my fingers are bleeding. Yeah, because they're growing calluses. You have to put yourself into the crucible to come out stronger. And you have to embrace the challenges or you don't grow. You become stagnant. You know, if it was easy, what was it? Bachman Turner Overdrive. It was easy as fishing. Everybody be a musician. You know, it's not. It's hard. You have to put in the time. You have to, you know, you have to.
There's a fishing quote that goes, if it was easy, they'd call it catching.
Yeah, that's why I go fishing at HEB.
So, all right. To wrap this up, what's the most rewarding part about stepping into those uncomfortable situations, both in music and in luthiery?
In the luthier end of it, it's taking, when I bring an instrument back from the dead and add it back into someone's family history. So many times musical instruments they're heirlooms. You know, they're part of, well, this was my granddad's guitar. Where'd you find it? Well, we found it in my Uncle Jimmy's basement. Uh-oh. You know, we open it up and it's busted up, it's tore up, stuff's rotten, you know. And to get those things back working and back into the family history, that's the best. I have a 1967 Gretsch Country Gentleman on my bench right now that I'm wrapping up a full binding replacement. Not a job for the faint of heart. I will charge more the next time it comes across. Single owner guitar. His parents bought it for him brand new in 1967. He was 16 years old. And this guitar has languished in a case for 30 years. And when it came out, all the binding was crumbling and I've got it back to the place where the electronics all work. The binding is back 100%. It looks like an old guitar. It's going to play like a brand new one and it'll be ready to be played for generations. And connecting with my guitar clients on that generational level, there's nothing more rewarding. You know, when a kid gets his first guitar, or when I fix dad's first guitar for his son, you know, or his grandson. Those are the things. I had a young man come in. His grandfather had built what I can best assume was a kit guitar of some sort. It had the hallmarks of kit parts, but a homemade body. And it was a project that his grandfather had started for his grandmother. And it had her name on the headstock. And then I think grandma passed away and grandpa lost interest in the project. And the grandson brought the guitar in to me to get it sorted out for him, finish the project. And I got a little choked up turning that guitar over to that kid because he was floored. He was so happy to have this guitar that his grandfather made with his grandmother's name on the headstock, and for me to get it playable for him, because it needed a bunch of stuff. Grandpa was close, you know what I mean, but it wasn't right, and it would have been an exercise in frustration for anybody trying to finish that project. But I kind of, I saw some of the pitfalls going into it, and I even explained to the kid, this is what's going to happen. And I got it done, and he was super, super happy with it. And the fact that it was a family thing that's now back in play, was huge, man. It was a big deal for me. Being part of that was just
Sure. So what's rewarding, turning over a build to somebody or getting that applause at the end of a set?
Oh, that's a different feeling. That's like the difference between a sneeze and a good meal. I don't know. It hits in a different place. There's an emotional connection when I deliver one of these heirloom instruments that's been restored. There's a sense of palpable pride when I deliver something that I just fixed, Hey, I got your guitar working. Awesome. Yeah, it feels good, doesn't it? And then there's a whole bundle of emotions when an audience responds to one of a song that you wrote. That's a whole nother, because it hits on so many levels. Because if it's a good song and it's got a groove, you're feeling the groove. You've played in bands, right? Have you ever done a solo set?
Yeah, acoustic, sure.
Okay. So, when you're in a band setting and you're cooking on, everything's running on all 8 cylinders.
When everybody's on time and it's just real, you're like in this there's higher plane. Yeah.
There's a different plane of existence, because all of a sudden you're floating along and the music is carrying you. And so you've got that feeling of, whether it's the music, the magical musical moments that happen, those fleeting moments of euphoria when you're in a band, and you've seen me play, there's times that I get lost in a rhythm and I'm lost in a song, and I kind of got to shake it off at the end of the song because I went there. I went to that place. And that is, it's emotional, but it's physical. There's a dopamine rush. There's an endorphin rush. There's so many good things just, when a performance lands with an instrument being delivered, whether it's one of these heritage, heirloom things, or if it's just your everyday, I changed the strings on your guitar, it plays so much better now. There's a sense of physical pride. Like, I did that. The heirloom stuff, there's that extra layer of emotion because now there's a detachment. Hell, half the reason we buy anything is because of the story that goes with the thing. You know what I mean? Why'd you buy that bottle of wine? Oh my God, the winemaker. What does it taste like? I forget, but the winemaker did this thing. It's like, why'd you buy that whiskey? Oh my God, their story was hilarious. It's like, so being part of someone's story on that end is, it's warm to me and it feels great. Landing a performance. Now you've added being part of someone's story, because now they're part of your story. You've added all those euphoric elements of being able to share the music, whether it's a super technical piece or if it's a really emotional piece of music, it just hits different, and it's that old adage about motorcycle riders. If I got to explain it to you, you wouldn't understand, and it kind of is that, musicians know. That's why when you walk into a bar and it's like, Eric Johnson's playing tonight. Well, that's because every guitar player in the room is there to see Eric Johnson, and you all know each other. Yeah, that guy, he's a musician. How do you know? And it just is, you just know. And there's that, it's kind of an unspoken, unwritten thing, but it's there, it's tangible. Like I said, the sticking a performance just hits different. It just hits different. It hits on so many levels.
And you need them both in your life.
I do. I don't think I could have one without the other. I have to have something to pick up and do. I got to have something physical that I can hold and touch. And sometimes playing gigs can be, especially when you're doing a bunch of solo gigs, it can be really lonely, and you feel like sometimes you're playing for strangers and the next day you're on to the next. So it's kind of important to have the mechanical aspect of luthier and being a guitar tech keeps things grounded and focused, where it allows me the opportunity to do the creative stuff or building the custom things for myself and figuring out the market for that custom thing, or building a custom thing on commission because someone saw a piece that I built for someone else and they're like, oh, I got to have one of those. Okay, well, it's going to be a little different, but I want one of those. I know, but it's going to be different. Why? Because I'm an artist.
Yeah.
This isn't a factory. I make the, it's sometimes it starts with, what's that? Well, it's going to be a guitar. you know, and then the next thing you know, you've got an instrument and you're like, ha, look at that. And if it was only that easy.
Todd, your insights into handling discomfort, whether through the strings of a guitar or the wood of an instrument, are truly inspiring. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. Do you have anything that you want to plug? This comes out 2 weeks from today.
Just, find Coming Up Muddy wherever you get your music. That's Coming Up Muddy. We're on all the major streaming services. So we do have new music coming out this year. That's as far as I can tease that because I got stuff done, but I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. You can find Gilbert and Roth, Half Fast Repairs, on Facebook and Instagram. I work out of the back of Blake's Music here in downtown, just outside of downtown Bastrop, Central Texas. Ask anybody that I owe money to. I'm real easy to find. But that's all I really want to plug. And of course, I thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I look forward to full disclosure, some of the things that you and I've got cooking. See where that goes. And thanks.
Yeah, man. Stay with us, everybody, as we wrap up today's episode with some key takeaways on embracing discomfort. This has been the Hard Knock University podcast. Welcome back to the Hard Knock University podcast. I'm your host, Mark Caples. We talked about discomfort. We learned from a blues musician about how he deals with discomfort. And now it's time to tackle the elephant in the room, change. Change is often uncomfortable, but it's also where all the growth happens. So let's dive into this final segment, embracing change.
I don't like change!
Embracing change isn't just about accepting it. It's about engaging with it, turning it into an opportunity rather than a roadblock. In project management, change is as inevitable as the sunrise, be it changes in the scope of work, your team dynamics, technology, or market demands. And first off, understand that even when it feels like a setback, it's often a step forward. So every project that's ever made a significant impact had to adapt from some form of change. The key is to see change not as an enemy, but as a teacher, showing us where we need to grow, pivot. Fostering a culture of flexibility is crucial. This means building teams that are resilient, where change is expected and prepared for. It's about creating an environment where team members feel safe to experiment, fail, and learn.
And now that you read this, all you need is experience. I don't feel safe.
Communication plays a pivotal role here. When changes occur, whether they're small tweaks or major overhauls, how you communicate them can make all the difference. It's about being transparent, explaining the why behind the changes, and involving your team in the process. This reduces resistance and turns discomfort into collective problem solving. Think of change as an opportunity for personal and professional development. Every change can be a learning moment, a chance to step up your game.
F&A cotton.
Here's an example from my own experience. I worked for a startup that initially operated on a pay-at-close model for pre-sale renovations. One day, we decided to shift to a pay-as-you-go approach. This wasn't just a change in billing. It transformed our entire business model. It meant we had to rethink our sales strategy, our project management, and even how we interacted with clients. The discomfort was palpable. We had to retrain teams, adjust our financial forecasts, and manage client expectations. But this change led to a more sustainable business model, a closer relationship with clients, and ultimately higher satisfaction rate. So it showed us that change, even when it feels daunting, can lead to innovation and better ways of doing things. The discomfort that comes with change is natural. Feeling uneasy when the ground beneath you shifts is part of the human experience. But here's the thing, discomfort is where we often do our best work. It's where we're pushed to innovate, to think differently, and to overcome limitations that we didn't even know we had.
F&A cotton, F&A.
So in wrapping up today's episode, embracing change means seeing it as a path to improvement, building a culture that values adaptability, communicating effectively to align expectations, and using change as a learning opportunity. Accept the discomfort as part of the process of growth.
Welcome to the knockback your seat. Mark's got the feedback, quick on his feet. Got you on them hard knock lessons in the mix. Brace yourself, his burns are slick.
Look, I know change can be scary. 1 minute, you're playing freeze tag out there at recess. Next thing you know, you're getting zits, your voice gets low, and every time your art teacher, Miss Scanlon, leans over your desk, you feel all squiggly inside. She was a striking woman. Not classically beautiful, but striking.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Hard Knock University podcast. This is the Knockback, where we take your feedback and spit it back at you. And as any musician knows, feedback can sometimes be a bad thing. So Todd,
Old feedback is awesome.
Yeah. So Todd's going to help me out with this one. So we have some stuff from X. The first one, pushed through stage fright for years. Each shaky performance taught me more than any rehearsal. Embracing the nerves made me a better artist. Fear is just fuel if you use it right. That's from @Music Mindset.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, you got some thoughts?
Yeah. I suffered with stage fright for years and years and years. And as a young man, and then eventually got into theater and high school as theater kids and got away from the stage fright. But then 15, 20 years down the road, trying to be a performer, he roaring that and getting up in a coffee house over caffeinated, all shaky and trying to, learn something about performance really is what got me over the hump. And then, by myself in front of 1,200 people, for one of my first paid gigs ever was, man, what a trial by fire. Yeah, absolutely. You learn so much more being on stage than you do in a rehearsal space. Rehearsal is for polish, but stage is where you learn a craft. 100%.
Yeah. So the inspiration there is work the grind. Keep putting in the hours.
It's the 10,000 hours. You have to do the things. I had a bass player once that he said, we got to play the song 12 times before we put it on stage.
Absolutely. @PM Vibe says, botched my first big project by micromanaging. Team burned out, deadline slip, hard lesson, trust your people, guide, don't control. Now I lead because I failed first. Yeah, man, micromanagement is the productivity suck. Yeah. You got to give your team room to make mistakes. They're going to mess up, but that's where the magic happens. That's an opportunity to learn.
Oh, totally agree. What a hard lesson to be a project manager. In the rear view, go, oh, I was that guy.
Yeah. But that's how we learn. We make mistakes.
Yep.
@Indie Toonsmith, tried to please every critic with my album, lost my sound, tanked the release, learned to trust my gut over the noise. Sometimes you got to crash to find your voice.
We talked about this a little while ago. I play for me. If I say something funny, it's because I found it funny. If you laugh, that's a bonus. If you enjoy a song that I crafted, that's a bonus. I make these things for me. It's not about my ego. It's about this is something that's growing in me that I have to get into the ether. I take it from the ether and put it out in the world, in the real world. And, there's lots of, the idea with songwriting is just get out of the way. Just get out of your own way and let the song happen. If you got it, you got it. If you don't, you don't. And don't force it. And don't listen to other, if it's your vision, it's your vision. Don't put on that hat and go, hey, well, I'm going to do this. And, there's a reason I don't do Bon Jovi covers in my set.
Yeah. I mean, when I'm writing music, I let the song write itself. What is it trying to tell me? What's the lesson here? And my responsibility is just to make it rhyme. @PM Lessons, I ignored a scope creep warning early on. Project spiraled, client bailed, painful but clear, set boundaries up front or pay later. Every scar's a strategy now. Yeah, that's my whole thing. Learn the hard way and don't make the same mistakes over and over and over again. With the scope creep, you're right. It's about setting boundaries up front. The first time that the scope starts to get a little out of hand, it's time to have a meeting and discuss it.
Albums are like that. Making an album is like that. When the vision starts to just get a little out of the loop and you got a producer or an engineer who's just not on the same page with you, and you're so in the moment that you just go with it. Next thing you know, you got a piece of garbage that you got a turd you got to polish, and it's like, no.
And it's on you for not setting that boundary when it first started happening.
Absolutely. Yeah. Did you not listen to your takes? You just go, okay, cool. No, you gotta stop, reboot sometimes.
That Sonic Perspective, skipped warm-ups, blew my voice mid-tour, Silence for weeks taught me discipline over ego. Respecting the craft hurts less than learning it the hard way.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough lesson to learn. I'm pretty bad about warm-ups, but I also don't tour consistently, so it's not a big deal. You know, obviously I could feel it this week, but that's just as much Central Texas pollen as 3 gigs.
But yeah, practice makes perfect. And not only that, but perfect practice makes perfect.
Perfect practice makes pretty good.
Yeah, but those warm-ups and everything, they're there for a reason. You know?
It's a big deal, especially if you're a belter. You know, if you have a spoken word style, it's a little different. But if you belt them out, you gotta work that muscle.
And maybe you can crank one out when you're young crank a bunch out while you're young without warming up. But you're not gonna be able to do that forever. Everybody gets old.
Hydrate, warm up,
yeah,
rest.
Well, Todd, thanks for joining us on the Knockback.
You bet.
Everybody be sure to follow Coming Up Muddy everywhere where music's available. And of course, Instagram, Facebook.
Book of Faces, and Threads.
Yeah, Threads. We're all doing Threads now. Join us all there.
I'm not on the dumpster fire of X, but I am on Threads, Facebook, and Instagram.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
First time I ever saw tan lines. Hey, one last thing. And I want everyone's eyes on me when I say this. Look at me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Hard Knock University podcast, where we explored the theme of embracing discomfort. We delved into Chapter 2 of the Hard Knock School of Project Management, You're Always Uncomfortable. We reviewed Ben Horowitz's book, What You Do Is Who You Are, seeing how cultural leadership thrives in discomfort. Our special guest, Todd Roth, shared invaluable insights on navigating the uncertainties of being a musician and an artisan luthier, drawing parallels to project management. And we wrapped up with a deep dive into the art of embracing change, understanding that it's through discomfort we find our greatest growth. Next week, we get ready to embrace the unknowns as we dive into Chapter 3 of the Hard Knock School of Project Management. You'll rarely have all the answers. We'll explore how the illusion of control can lead to project pitfalls and discuss the virtues of humility and adaptability in leadership. We'll also review Verbal Judo by Dr. George J. Thompson, learning how to navigate communication in high-stakes environments. Plus, we'll have an enlightened conversation with Bruce Graham, where we'll bust the myth of omniscience in project management, that no one has all the answers, and that's perfectly okay. Remember, just like in project management, life is full of questions without immediate answers. But here's the inspiration. In not knowing, in embracing that discomfort, we open ourselves up to learning, to innovation, and to connecting with others in ways we never thought possible. It's in the moments of uncertainty that we truly discover who we are, what we're capable of, and how we can lead others through the unknown. So as we bid you farewell for this week, remember, discomfort is not just a part of the journey, it's the catalyst for transformation. Stay curious, stay brave, and we'll see you next week on the Hard Knock University podcast.
Well, I never missed last night. Won't you come over here, little darling? Baby, you just might.